Slowly, I peeled my eyes away from the worn-out pages of the eerie tale from Whitehall, a lingering chill making me shudder. I glanced at Helena, who had been watching me with an impassive expression. Her green eyes were clouded with concern as she observed the goosebumps prickling my skin.
"We can't let Corvida continue her reign of terror,"
Helena said, breaking the silence.
"We need to sever her connection to the undead."
A nod was all I could manage, my mind swirling with the horrors of Sam's story, my undaunting task ahead, and the fear of what lay waiting for us in the woods. Despite this, a fierce determination kindled within me, pushing the fear aside. I wasn't going to let Corvida turn Gallows End into another Whitehall. Helena's hand was warm as it closed around my wrist, her touch grounding me amidst the storm in my mind.
"We've got a plan. We just need to stay focused and follow it through,"
she said, her voice steady, resolute. And so, we set off once again towards Corvida's lair, armed with Dominic's knowledge, our determination, and the haunting lessons from Whitehall. We traversed the eerily silent forest, a sense of foreboding prickling at the back of my neck as we neared Corvida's lair once again. But something felt different. The usual cacophony of nocturnal creatures was oddly absent, replaced with an unsettling quiet that seemed to cloak the forest. As we drew closer to where we remembered the lair to be, it became apparent that something was terribly wrong. There were no signs of the cabin, no eerie shadows of twisted structures, no mark of the raven that had been emblazoned on the door. The lair had disappeared. I shared a look of disbelief with Helena, who seemed as perplexed as I was. The absence of the undead was unsettling, but the vanishing of Corvida's lair was even more concerning. Had we misjudged the cunning of the Sisters of the Ebony Veil? Before either of us could contemplate further, a sound pierced the silence. An all too familiar moan echoed through the forest, quickly followed by more. Turning around, we saw them, rising from the shadows like an undulating mass of darkness, the undead. And there were dozens of them, maybe more.
"Run!"
Helena shouted, and we did. We fled through the forest, the relentless drone of moans and rustling foliage close on our heels. The narrow trees seemed to close in around us as we desperately tried to escape, their skeletal branches reaching out like gnarled hands trying to trap us. The undead were everywhere, their sheer numbers overpowering. We swung and blasted at them with our combined magical and physical might, trying to make a path through the teeming horde. But with every step forward, we were forced 2 steps back. This was a trap, a ploy devised by the cunning sisters. Corvida was still pulling the strings of the undead. We had thought we were ready to face her, but now, we were just trying to survive. As the horde closed in, Helena suddenly changed direction, heading deeper into the forest. I'd followed without question, adrenaline pumping through my veins. We were heading towards a colossal mound in the distance that I initially took for a hill, but as we approached, I noticed a grotesque, rotted quality to it. The ground was littered with bones, their white gleams dark against the gloomy forest floor. "What are we doing?" I gasped out, my breath ragged.
"Just follow me,"
was her only response. The mound began to shudder and shake, and I stumbled back, horrified, as I realized that this was no hill. It was a creature, a monstrosity that dwarfed even the tallest trees. With a deafening roar, it lurched forward, massive limbs pounding the earth. The undead horde, in their mindless pursuit, stumbled straight into the creature's path. Its enormous form crashed into them, flinging undead bodies like mere toys. The creature began tearing through the horde with devastating speed, each movement causing an eruption of dirt and bone. I stood there, petrified at the scene of destruction, the shambling mound a horrifying yet awe-inspiring sight. Helena grabbed my arm, pulling me from my stupor.
"We need to move now,"
she shouted over the din. "But, what is that?" I stuttered, unable to tear my eyes away from the monstrosity.
"No time to explain,"
she said, pulling me along as we ran away from the nightmare scene, leading the monstrosity to decimate the horde. Despite our escape, The image of the monstrous creature and the carnage it wrought stayed with me, a stark reminder of the dark magic that twisted this world. And the chilling fact that Helena knew more about this world's dangers than she let on. As we put distance between ourselves and the roiling nightmare we left behind, our priorities snapped sharply back into focus. Corvida. We needed to sever her connection to the undead. Every second we wasted, every delay, was a chance for her to gather more information, to set more traps, to make more of these cursed creatures. The undead were not just a threat, but a constant reminder of Corvida's influence and reach. I suddenly felt sick. The undead that we had been encountering were not the same ones over and over. They were new victims of this perverse magic. This horrifying realization washed over me in a chilling wave.
The undead, they are still being created, aren't they?
I asked, my voice hoarse. Helena nodded grimly, her eyes reflecting the cold dread that had settled in my own heart.
Yes, as long as Corvida remains, the undead will keep growing in numbers. That's why we need to cut off her control.
I took a deep, shaky breath, trying to steady my nerves. Every moment we delayed, more people fell victim to Corvida's reign of terror. We had to act, and fast. We pushed forward, determination fueling our steps. We were walking a razor's edge, a constant tug-of-war between pursuing our mission and avoiding detection. It was a delicate balance, one we couldn't afford to upset. As night fell, we sought refuge in a small thicket hidden within the dense forest. Helena raised her palm, her voice softly reciting an incantation.
Lumina Adusto.
With her words, a spark ignited in the palm of her hand, growing and twisting until it dropped onto the collected kindling at our feet. The wood crackled and sparked, growing into a small, comforting fire, bathing us in a warm, orange glow that held the darkness at bay.
It's not going to be easy, you know,
Helena said, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames.
Severing Corvida's connection to the undead. It's like cutting the puppet strings, but each string is threaded through countless others. It's all tangled, intertwined.
I looked at her, my mind reeling with the enormity of our task. So, how do we even begin to untangle that mess?
We'll need to perform a ritual, one that can disrupt her control and free the undead from her influence. It's complex and requires absolute precision. One wrong move, one mispronounced incantation, and it could all come crashing down.
She explained, her voice steady and composed despite the gravity of her words. I fell silent, my gaze dropping to the small pendant in my hands. Obsidian, the first of the sisters we'd managed to ensnare. I turned it over, studying its intricate designs as my mind raced.
We need to do this right, Helena. We can't afford any mistakes.
She nodded, her eyes meeting mine with a fierce determination.
I know, and we will. We'll prepare, train, practice until we get it right. We have to.
The remainder of the night was spent discussing the ritual, the intricate steps and precise incantations we would need to perfect. The comforting glow of our campfire illuminated the warm pages of Helena's grimoire as I tried to commit every detail to memory. The haunting whispers of the incantations echoed in my mind as I drifted to sleep, the steady crackle of our fire a constant reminder of the daunting task ahead. As the first rays of dawn penetrated the forest canopy, I awoke to a world swathed in a pale, misty haze. Dewdrops clung to the leaves and grass, twinkling like tiny stars in the soft morning light. All seemed calm, serene even, until my eyes caught sight of a figure standing in the fog. I bolted upright, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The figure was indistinct, shrouded in the mist, yet it stood there, silent and motionless, watching us. Helena, I whispered urgently, nudging her awake.
Someone's here.
She blinked open her eyes, quickly taking in the situation. I watched as her gaze fell on the figure in the mist, her eyes narrowing. But instead of the alarm I expected, a look of realization passed over her features.
Wait,
She said, holding up a hand to stop me as I began to rise.
it's not real. It's an illusion.
An illusion? I blinked, turning my gaze back to the figure. Now that she mentioned it, there was an ethereal quality to it, a faint shimmer that suggested it wasn't entirely solid. But that didn't explain who or what had cast it.
Corvida.
Helena murmured, her eyes never leaving the figure.
It's another one of her games. She's trying to scare us, make us think we're being watched.
Isn't that exactly what's happening?
She is watching us, I retorted, feeling a chill crawl up my spine. Even if it was an illusion, the thought of Corvida's eyes on us was unnerving.
True,
Helena conceded with a nod.
but we won't let her scare us. We have a task to complete, and we won't let her mind games distract us.
As we watched, the figure suddenly tilted its head, much like a curious dog. However, it didn't stop there. The head continued to turn, unnaturally, a full 180 degrees. An audible popping sound echoed through the silent woods, causing me to flinch. It was as if bones were being snapped and crushed, the noise increasing in intensity with each passing moment. The head continued its horrific rotation until it had made a full circle, a grotesque display of inhuman flexibility. I could feel the blood drain from my face as the figure collapsed, a lifeless puppet with its strings cut. As it hit the ground, the illusion fizzled out of existence, leaving no trace of its presence behind. The echo of the popping sound still rang in my ears, a chilling reminder of Corvida's power and the gruesome spectacle we just witnessed. The message was clear. This was a warning, a display of what she was capable of. I felt my hands ball into fists, a mix of fear and determination surging through me. "We need to end this, Helena," I said, my voice hard, "before she harms anyone else."
Helena nodded, her face ashen but her eyes steel.
We will. And soon.
With a resolute nod, Helena began weaving intricate symbols in the air humming with the buildup of arcane energies. It was as if a transparent dome had been erected around us, a shimmering barrier of protection. Outside, the once peaceful forest had turned into a ghastly battlefield. Undead creatures began to emerge from the forest, their shambling forms moving with an unnatural coordination. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched them approach, a chill running down my spine at the sight of their lifeless eyes, glowing with a malevolent light. Then, she emerged from the shadows, Corvida. Her arms stretched wide in a cruel parody of an embrace, a wicked grin spreading across her face as she reveled in the control she held over her gruesome army. Her hands moved with calculated precision, guiding her undead minions like a sinister puppeteer. The undead launched themselves at the barrier, their bodies crunching and collapsing under the sheer force of their attacks. The sounds were nauseating, the sight even worse. Each undead that fell was replaced by another, their groans and cries echoing through the early morning air. My stomach churned as the sickening scene unfolded. Helena's sharp voice brought me back from my grim fascination. Her hand made a swift, final gesture, and the dome around us solidified, almost audibly locking into place. The eerie light it emitted shone brighter than the campfire from earlier, casting long, skewed shadows around us.
Focus.
She barked, a note of urgency in her voice. Steadying myself, I started my part of the ritual. My words were a counterpoint to Helena's, the two parts weaving together into a complex harmony. The air around us crackled with energy, the barrier glowing even brighter in response to our magic. As our chants continued, I could feel a pressure building in the air, the weight of our magic pushing against the tangible force of Corvida's control. Suddenly, with a flash of blinding light, streams of mana burst forth from our encampment. They danced and twisted in the air, slicing through the dim dawn light like radiant serpents, creating a dazzling spectacle against the horrific backdrop of the undead army. The magic hummed and pulsed with power, thrumming in my ears and vibrating under my feet. The ground beneath us seemed to resonate with the energy, adding its own deep, thrumming note to the chorus of our incantations. As the undead started to fall, one by one, an eeriness overtook the battlefield. Their groans of despair and agony slowly faded away, their bodies crumpling lifelessly onto the dew-kissed grass. This sudden stillness, however, was a brief moment of respite before the storm. The air crackled with a renewed sense of dread and, out of nowhere, an invisible onslaught of nightmares descended upon me. In this nightmarish realm, shadows danced with twisted glee. Dark figures loomed over me, leering with grotesque faces of fear. Friends and family whom I hadn't seen in years stood beside me, their faces blank, their eyes vacant. An intense feeling of isolation and despair overwhelmed me, the chilling sense of dread gnawing at my sanity. I was reliving the most terrifying moments of my life, amplified tenfold. My mother's death, my father's disappointment, the overwhelming sense of being lost and alone in a world that didn't care. Corvida had latched onto these fears and was using them against me. My concentration faltered, the nightmarish images tearing me away from the ritual. I could feel the protective barrier waver, its strength diminishing with my wavering resolve. I could hear Helena's voice through the chaos, her words a beacon of hope in the ever-encroaching darkness. But the nightmares were too powerful, too overwhelming. It was as if I was being swallowed whole by my deepest, darkest fears. And there seemed to be no way out. Just when I thought the terror couldn't possibly intensify, the earth beneath me suddenly seemed to dissolve into an abyss. From the dark hole, Corvida surged forth like a phantom, her figure shrouded in a chilling mist. Before I could react, her cold, bony hand shot out and pressed against my forehead. A flood of nightmarish images washed over me, so real and vivid they might as well have been my reality. Faces of loved ones distorted in pain and fear, visions of myself writhing under torturous devices, the world around me collapsing into chaos and ruin. As this spectral horror show played out inside my head, I could feel the physical toll it was taking on my body. My skin felt stretched thin, my muscles weakened, my joints ached with a fatigue I had never known. I could feel wrinkles forming on my brow, my hair thinning and graying at an alarming pace. It was as if each passing second in this torment was equal to years in the real world. Every horror, every fear, every desperate cry for help seemed to carve lines of age into my face. My once young and spry body now felt old and worn, as if it had been through a lifetime of hardships in the span of a few heartbeats. The coldness from Corvida's touch seemed to seep into my very bones, turning them brittle and frail. Through it all, I could hear the echoes of Corvida's laughter, a cruel, heartless sound that reveled in my torment. Just when I thought I had succumbed to an eternal nightmare, a radiant burst of light cut through the darkness. Helena stood like a beacon in the storm, her aura blazing with the force of her magic. The image of Corvida dissipated like smoke, leaving me in a dazed stupor. My mind was struggling to piece together the reality of the situation. The horrors I'd seen and felt were still too fresh, too raw. I thought Corvida had been real, that she had physically reached out and subjected me to a lifetime of torment. But the absence of her cold touch and the dissipating terror reminded me of the fact. It was all an illusion. Before I could fully process what was happening, I felt Helena's hand on my forehead. I could see an apology in her eyes before everything went blank. The next moment, it was as though I was a mere observer in my own body. Helena had taken control, guiding my voice to continue the incantation. The words flowed from my lips, their rhythm steady, their power unwavering. In the corner of my eye, I could see the undead that had been throwing themselves at the barrier now collapsing, one after another. It was working. The connection was being severed. Despite the fear, the exhaustion, and the lingering terror of the nightmare I had endured, a glimmer of hope began to ignite within me. The end was in sight, and we were one step closer to bringing Corvida's reign of terror to an end. as Corvida's connection to the undead began to sever under the effect of Helena's curse. My body, still under Helena's control, started the sealing process. The locket in my hand vibrated with an otherworldly energy, and the air between us and Corvida seemed to ripple, as if reality itself was bending under the spell's influence. But just as the sealing spell was nearing its completion, a sharp, gut-wrenching scream echoed through the forest, halting the process abruptly. A figure stepped from the shadows, her features obscured by the darkness around her. Yet, the power emanating from her was unmistakable. It was the third sister. Her sudden appearance had disrupted the spell, and the tension in the air thickened. The fight was far from over.